The story begins at an auction, where a certain red-headed girl who was sitting in the center of the room was being sold. 100 million zlotys! Will there be a higher bid? This foreign girl is worth 100 million zlotys. Is there anyone willing to give more? No? Sold. Sold for 100 million zlotys, shouted the auctioneer, banging his gavel on the table. Since it's mine now, I'm taking it, said a certain blonde-haired guy, wrapping the girl in a blanket and taking her in his arms. The girl was very tired. She was shivering all over. You should sleep, and when you open your eyes, we'll have already left this place, said the hay guy, stepping away from this hall. The next morning, the girl woke up abruptly, jumping out of bed. She immediately began to look at her trembling hands, which bore the marks of the rope with which she was bound. At that moment, 2 butlers entered her chambers, saying, "This is the castle of the Archduke Ernest. No one will harm you," said one of them, in order to reassure the girl. "How long have I been here?" Still trembling a little, the girl asked. 4 days. We were already worried since you didn't wake up, replied the butler calmly. Without wasting a moment, the girl asked the butler for a pen and paper, ordering him to leave them under her feet. If this is really the castle of the Archduke, I must run away quickly before they find out the truth about me, thought the girl, seating herself on the floor, starting to write something on a piece of paper. The drawing isn't pretty because of the shivering, but it's enough, she thought, trying to calm the trembling in her hands. With the help of the drawing on the sheet, the girl was able to visualize the bird on which she descended the balcony. I need transportation for a successful escape, thought the young lady, picking up the sheet of paper again, starting to draw something on it. Suddenly the girl bumped into someone and fell to the ground. Dazzling golden hair and high nose, big strong hands typical of people wielding a sword, a man whose beauty is like a god driving a solar chariot. It was the main male character, Ernest Teshuba, the Archduke. And at that moment, 7 sweats came off the girl. She realized how about 10 days ago she had fallen into this affair. It all started when the girl woke up in a wagon that was being taken to an auction. That's when she heard that she was a slave of the highest grade, and that a certain prince was to appear at the auction. The girl also heard rumors about a certain blood relative of the sun god who was also to appear at the auction. Then the 2 men talked about one thing. I don't really want to sell her, because the ladies from this desert area are especially hot. That's when it came to the girl's attention that she was reborn as a quarter villain. It was a popular novel. It must have been read by 1,000 people. But Agnes abandoned it at the moment of her favorite character's death in prison. And why did it have to happen to me? No, and yet. By the way, being a minor villain isn't so bad, thought Agnes, lounging in a warm rose petal bath. But overall, villain number 4 is Misty. She was the most clingy to the main character, and hated the main character endlessly for being with him. A villain who simply watched the protagonist die, which is why the protagonist threw her into the dungeon where she died. Agnes recalled the plot of the novel. However, it was all a trap by the main villain. Misty was the most unfortunate character, hated by everyone, thought the girl. And the reason for all this was her beauty. The girl was incredibly cute, gloriously came from the world of long ago. Of course, the number of references to this in the novel irritated Agnes furiously. The pretty girl comes from the drawing mages, and why isn't she the main character? If she was, the novel would have blown all the tops, thought the girl, looking at her reflection in the mirror. Suddenly, a knock was heard outside the door. It was the butler what notified about the upcoming dinner. The butler seems to have hung up the house clothes in the closet, thought the girl, searching with her eyes for a suitable outfit. My Korean nature doesn't allow me to talk like a know-it-all, and I don't know. And noble family Misty had. So far, the locals don't seem suspicious, but all that could change at any moment, thought the girl as she left the bathroom. And if you think about it, it's a hodgepodge of the medieval world with its horses and swords, with all sorts of train mechanisms mixed in, the girl remarked to herself as she sat down at the table. The girl also noticed that the Archduke was leafing through a certain magazine. Archduke Ernest, passionate love with a beautiful woman? Agnes noticed the loud headline on the front page, to which the boy replied, "Nonsense. It's full of unfounded rumors and unverified information. Eat up! It's liquid clam soup, so it'll be easy to swallow," the guy also added as a hot plate was placed in front of the girl. Well, while the girl rated spoonful after spoonful of her soup, going over in her head how decent it was to start the first meal, the Duke decided to start a story about himself. The guy was also interested in what the girl was caught for, to which the girl began to recall the story of the novel. The fourth villain came from a small magical kingdom, has a rare ability, drawing magician. She masterfully possessed the skill, realization of the drawn in life. It was easy to understand that there were those who wanted to get her, and if caught, she could only bite her tongue and die. But to shorten the whole story, the girl said that she was only a drawing mage. From this whole story, the Duke concluded that the girl was kicked out of the settlement. And also the girl has limitations, since she could not defend herself in the desert, and she apparently has nowhere to go now. This angered Agnes a bit, for she was already thinking of a plan to escape from the estate. "If you have nowhere else to go, you can stay here for a while." The Duke's phrase made the girl remember. After all, this scene was a memory from the past of the fourth Villainous. "I would like to get your testimony against the organizers of the slave auction. As soon as the interrogation is over, I will deliver you anywhere." The Duke continued to speak still without emotion. The girl was a little confused at such an offer, but there was nowhere to go. "I need to recover after all! Someone is following him all his life. It turns out he doesn't like to communicate at all, looking the interlocutor in the eyes," the girl noticed when the guy left the dining room. Well, without wasting a minute, the girl enthusiastically caught the butler and decided to ask, "What are the professions here that bring a lot of money?" At this point, her eyes shone brighter than diamonds. "Pardon me for saying this, but the lady did not wander off in the middle of the night looking for your bedroom, sir." The butler stood behind the Duke's back and gave him a report. Ernest, for some reason, was deeply convinced that the girl, for whatever reason, might have fallen in love with him. "She doesn't seem to place much importance on them. But money," the butler said. "All right, if she really didn't fall in love with me, we should check it again," Ernest said. Selling special clothes for high society ladies or creating a place for entertainment were a few options Agnes was pondering about in order to make more money. Running a brand of fashionable outfits might well be worth thinking about. But what kind of harmless entertainment can I offer? After all, everyone likes to have fun. The girl continued to think as she lay in the bathtub full of flowers. By the way, I'm probably one of the 0.1% of people who can adapt. Everything suddenly changed, and I didn't shed a tear. Sure, because here I can say goodbye to both mold and life in the basement. Do I want to work my whole life to pay off my student loans? No, I like it better here. The girl relaxed, trying to forget her past life. Suddenly, Duke's voice was heard outside the door, worried about the girl, for she had belonged in the bathroom for the past hour. "It's all right. I'll be out soon. All that's left is to rinse once," the girl answered him. But suddenly the bathroom door swung open, and a completely naked girl stood before the Duke. These were the antics of the little fairy servants. The girl was in total despair. It seemed to her that her luxurious future was collapsing right before her eyes, because how will she now after such a look in the face of the Duke? Walking down the corridor, the Duke was in his thoughts. "I immediately noticed that she is quite thin, and these wounds must have received when she was caught. It is obvious that she is from a noble family, but I did not give her a maid. I admit a mistake." At the same moment, he called the butler to him, saying, "Give the guest the ointment that I take with me when I go to war, and also see to it that plenty of bread is served at dinner for weight gain." This actually surprised the butler a little, for the Duke did not like bread. "Also add more meat and cheese than usual. Everything must be of the highest quality," Ernest added, walking further down the corridor. In order for her to gain weight to a healthy level, we'll have to feed her well, thought the Duke, looking out the window. However, this is quite strange. All this time, many ladies have been constantly pestering me, and it was quite unpleasant. But why is there not even a hint of disgust this time? Blushing slightly with his hand covering his face, Ernest continued to ponder. Could we get along with her? She stood in front of me naked, but reacted so innocently. Perhaps foreign women are immune to the power of the sun god's blood? Or is there something special about her? Honestly, I was expecting her to pounce on me, too. To calm the heat of the sun raging inside, there must be a woman with strong moon energy. This is the way my ancestors, who suffered from the same symptoms, found it. The best choice is a wedding, but even living under the same roof is enough to subdue the yang energy. The problem is that it takes a sensible woman capable of contracting marriage, because in the end, a woman's feelings will become much stronger. She reminded me of a sunset, as if she was born in tongues of flame. I hope it works out. I really believe in her. Honestly, I feel like a schoolgirl sending a scolding message to the teacher, thought Agnes walking down the corridor. She did not notice how she bumped into the butler. Go inside and wait for me! I'll get everything ready! Said only the man, clearing the way for the girl. Going deep into the hall, the girl's eyes began to shine brighter than diamonds again, because she saw on the table a mountain of flowers starting from small cakes and ending with a huge cake. It was a paradise for the girl, especially when a freshly cooked steak was placed before her. But she was in no hurry to eat it, for she was not quite sure how to cut it properly, so she waited for Ernest to do it. But what was her surprise when the fellow himself offered to cut the steak for her? That wasn't necessary at all, the girl thought awkwardly. You must eat well so that the wound heals sooner. This phrase of the Duke made the girl almost choke on a piece of meat. There is news in the paper again of Archduke Ernest's passionate affair, but this time with another lady. Began to read out to Agnes the latest news from the magazine. It doesn't interest me at all. The vicious articles come out one after another, said the Duke. But still, it's a little over the top. Did you go to the editorial office? The girl decided to clarify after all, looking at the boy. With a heavy sigh, the guy answered her that it was all useless, because the instigator of all this is the princess. She is the number 2 villain, preventing the protagonist and heroine from being together. Her candidacy was even considered in the selection of the future emperor, a woman with a sadistic character who likes to bring beautiful men to tears. That is why the morning review of the press and checking the written nonsense has already become a routine of the Duke. Although the newspaper he mostly takes from other news, he just does not pay attention to them. He also added that he can't stop girls clinging to him on their way to service. They are constantly bribing the servants, which is why there are only 2 butlers on the estate now. When I stay in the Knights' barracks, I get peeped at in the showers, and during training they run up and faint in danger. Relentlessly continued to speak the Duke with a grim face that epitomized all disgust. The girl listened quietly to the guy's complaints about his popularity until he offered her to be his wife for 3 years. To be precise, first the engagement and then the wedding. You got that right, the guy clarified a bit. You're a drawing mage. You don't have to worry about assassins. All these phrases did not calm the girl in any way and did not reduce her surprise at such a sudden proposal. All these beautiful words about the amount of money the girl could get by agreeing to it did not take away her caution. But why me? Where did such trust come from? We hardly know each other. On what will I become reliant on you? Such caution and straightforwardness to the girl pleasantly surprised the fellow. That auction, originally, I had planned to destroy everybody, Ernest said. But when I saw you, it was like something flashed in my head, drugged. You were burning with the desire to tear everyone to pieces, and that delighted me. Remembering those brightly blazing blue eyes at the auction, the guy continued. I'm sure you can do shamelessness from the bottom of your heart, since you're talking to me informally. And in front of the princess's face, You won't be embarrassed." The guy finished his story. This made the girl wonder if she was now being praised or insulted after all. "Maybe I will stay here for the rest of my life. So this is a good chance. Money, a luxurious life is right in front of my eyes now, and the protagonist of the novel will not appear until a year from now, so there is still plenty of time," Agnes thought, going over the plot of the novel in her head. "Just in case, I'm against marriage. I wouldn't make it for real. But if I marry you, it will look like I can't live without you, so you can use my name and do whatever you want." Such words of the Duke made the girl wonder if she would be executed after that. The guy calmed her down by saying that he would protect her from everything, but in return, he wanted her to become the most luxurious and brazen woman in the Empire, so that no one would ever think of approaching her just by seeing her once. "The Duke has decided to save himself from the wolf by showing the tiger." The girl quite believed in her own strength. Also, the girl did not forget about paying for her favors. "In return, I will give you 10 billion zlotys," the Duke told her with a cold face. Simple math immediately flashed in the girl's mind. 1 zloty was roughly equal to 10,000 won, and the prices here were much lower, so she had no reason to refuse. Standing up from the table, she uttered, "Dear customer, I'm ready to serve you. I'll become the crazy girl of this neighborhood." "But give me half of it in advance now!" smilingly pronounced the girl, stretching her hand forward. "I was afraid I couldn't provide for myself here, and he offers 10 billion. I'll make a contract with him and get the money, and when the main character appears, I'll just run away." That was the young lady's plan. Well, the girl was ready to organize any performance so that everyone's body trembled, but in return asked to add to the contract only 2 conditions. The first condition was to be on her side whatever happened, and the second was that if the Duke should fall in love with someone else, he would be obliged to take care of Agnes's peaceful life. After the guy agreed, the girl's eyes lit up with hellfire. "Don't worry. We'll marry for the sake of divorce, and I'll scare away all the women trying to get close to you." While the girl was daydreaming, the butler brought her a contract that was drawn up by the Duke. "The name Titania is like a real fairy and fits perfectly. I approve," said the girl, reading the terms. Not having time to shake hands in token of the accepted agreement, the Duke suddenly jumped up on the table, approaching the girl. Having fallen the girl on the floor, he protected her with his body from the soporific, poisonous needles that stabbed right into his arm. The girl shuddered as she realized they were aimed at her face. Someone destroying competitors in such nefarious ways. Of course, it was villain number 1. Without a second's hesitation, the girl grabbed the ink and had the Duke remove his vest, turning his back to her. Then, taking off even his shirt, she drew something and threw it out of the window right at the enemy, and then they disappeared. "What did you draw there?" the Duke asked her. "Company secret," the girl answered him, for how would she say she drew fire arrows stinging their asses? "Anyway, don't forget my 10 billion, dear client," the girl reminded him with a cheeky smile. Well, that's something the guy obviously won't forget about. And he also said, "And also outside, be sure to call me." But no sooner had he finished than the girl playfully listed all possible variants. Dear and favorite, sweetie or darling. Such eagerness, of course, the Duke did not expect from the girl. "Though the villains here are pretty nasty, I think I can handle them. How can I refuse the 10 billion contract? Various threats await me, but I won't back down," thought the girl, thinking about all the events that had happened during yesterday. Getting up from the bed, the girl grabbed a quill and a piece of paper, trying to put all her knowledge in order. The first villain, Peridot Christine, is the Lady Duchess. The second villain, Diolis Terran, is the princess. The third villain, Macy Amatin, is the Lady Countess. Macy was the head of the Archduke's fan club. Agnes couldn't really remember anything important about her, because she was just annoying the Duke about little things. The biggest problem is the first villain. She has no morals or limits. If she wants to, she can kill at any time. That leaves the second villain, Princess Diolis Terran, who must definitely be taken care of. At this moment in the study, The Duke recalled the moment when the girl started listing all the affectionate nicknames for him. "Sweetie, dearie, am I sure I'm doing everything right?" Still, such persistence from the girl was a bit frightening to the guy. While treating the young lord's wound, the butler remarked, "You hurt yourself protecting her. I think this lady has taken a liking to you." To which the Duke only remarked on her oddities of character. "Her nerves seem to be made of steel," continued the Duke. Finishing treating the wound, the butler put the medicine on a shelf and told the lord to go to bed, soothing his worries. "No, she won't refuse you, and she certainly won't die. I can only hope so, though luck was on her side, for she was full of passion from the beginning," the Duke thought, returning his thoughts to the auction. How can I explain that emotion? The flash? A feeling that everything will work out with her that I can't put into words. Ernest pondered with a heavy sigh as he prepared for bed. Since morning there was noise in the palace. The girl's voice woke everyone in the palace. Agnes decided that she and the Duke should go out in public to announce that they were now in a relationship. Ernest flatly refused because it was dangerous. "You were attacked a couple of days ago," the boy decided to remind her. Decided to remind the guy. But this did not embarrass the young lady. She was preparing something special for her defense. And after the girl began to rummage in her cleavage, as if looking for something there, such a gesture embarrassed the boy a little, for he did not expect such directness. "Look at that," said the girl, holding out her hand. Said the girl, holding out some drawing to the guy. "By the way, I realize you don't like women, but play along," decided after all, reminding Agnes's boyfriend of the deal walking into the carriage. "If you don't know what to do, play along with me. You can guess, can't you?" The girl kept pestering him. "Very well, that's enough. Let's make a beginning with the first rumor. The main thing is to turn the glances directed at the Archduke in my direction. Will I become more comfortable?" The whole way, the girl thought only of this. As Agnes was a student of art, such a splendid art shop could not leave her without special attention. Her eyes shone brighter than the stars again. When she got out of the carriage, she didn't expect the boy to give her his hand, but she decided to make the most of it. "Going down," the girl pretended as if she had slipped and fallen, thus giving the guy a push to catch her. After that, all the fierce stares behind her back just burned a hole in her. All she had to do was endure it to solely own Mr. Popularity. Great! I assumed she wasn't bothered by other people's gazes, but she so sincerely ignores them. In private, she speaks to me informally, but in public, she artificially addresses me as you. She definitely grew up in a noble family. The Duke continued to admire his companion. At that moment, the girl was just choosing her brushes. "I would like to buy as many as possible at once," Agnes said to him, intently selecting her tools. "She is rather small in stature, and her wrists are so thin but strong. She must be beautiful when she takes a brush in those hands and paints." The boy was still in thought, not hearing what Agnes was saying to him. Suddenly, her voice cut through his loud thoughts, and turning his head towards the girl, he was too close to her. This closeness surprised not only those around him, but also the girl herself. "I hope the number of attempts won't increase too much after this. Well, if I'm going to die, I'll surprise everyone to the core first," thought the girl, and without wasting an opportunity, pulled the guy by the scruff of the neck to her lips. Then, when all the shock had gone out of the guy, and the whole audience was already squealing with horror, the girl innocently took the guy's hand and said, "Oh, without realizing it myself, I hope that's enough to boost the sales of tomorrow's paper. Honestly, shouldn't I be paid a commission for that?" Still, the girl's thoughts were more mercantile than the Duke could have imagined. Leaving the art shop, the girl noticed even more furious looks on her face, which embarrassed her a little. Agnes didn't need the expensive dresses that were the base for the first Villainous at all. She was more interested in the salon with quality clothes that had been pushed aside by more famous stores. In the novel, it had been casually noticed by the protagonist, but now Agnes decided to pick it up first. "I want to pick up a dress for my bride. I'm not good at them at all, so please take care of her," The price doesn't matter. The main thing is that the dress fits. The lady said that there are excellent ateliers here, said Ernest, as soon as they approached the counter in the store. The girls that worked there admired the beauty of the future Archduchess. We will try our best, because you believed in us and came, said the young ladies with gratitude and admiration. While everyone was swarming around the future Duchess, Agnes was thinking, if the Archduke's bride chooses a dress here, from today on this shop will be the most popular, and the design is not so important, because whatever I wear, my face will make the clothes perfect. This was the girl's attitude, so she asked for all the outfits to be brought to her all the way to the end of the row she was pointing at. The couple stayed in the city until sunset, the girl so exhausted that she fell asleep in the carriage. Noticing this, the butler offered his assistance to carry the lady to her bedroom, to which the Duke said, "That way she might wake up. I'll take care of her myself. You may go." Ernest didn't really understand where she came from at all. He had spent the previous night investigating, but still couldn't find any information. Thanks to the merchants, he only found out that she was from the desert, and nothing else beyond that. Oh, and who would ever think that a drawing mage could roll so pricelessly? Such thoughts visited the guy as he unceremoniously regarded the sleepy girl that slept peacefully on the couch. I was not unpleasant at all, and her touch is not disgusting. The accidental kiss happened on her initiative. Let's call it a collision of lips. At that moment, my heart was beating so powerfully. And why do I want to do it again? These thoughts continued to bother the boy. Meanwhile, newspapers were already spreading on the streets of the city that the Duke had a bride, and new weaves have attracted the entire female population, because there were rumors that he is against even a marriage of convenience, and hear the news that he is marrying someone. Suddenly, someone in a cloak came to the guy who was selling newspapers. He obviously scared the little guy. Having bought a newspaper from him, the guy was dissatisfied with something. Following the merchant, I came all the way here, and suddenly you're getting married? Did that Archduke bribe you? Looking at all these articles, not everyone in the kingdom was happy, and also did not believe that the young Duke was getting married. It's unknown who becomes Ernest Archduchess. I can't admit it, said one of the young ladies that sat at the table. She will now become a member of the Imperial family. Who the hell is she? Called out the second lady. That's right. You can't just calmly observe. I understand your feelings perfectly. With a cute smile on her face, the very same second villainous Dioli said, "We need to hold a tea party, and of course only members of our fan club can attend." With that phrase, her eyes filled with a kind of fury and ill will. Agnes had been living at Ernest's manor for half a month and had been visited by assassins 3 times in the middle of the night. Twice a bomb had been thrown at her during a walk, and once iron filings had been added to her bath cream. There'd be enough rumors by now to wrap the capital 5 times over. Maybe it's time to get started. Agnes decided to start the conversation after all. Ernest calmly told her, "There's one good place, the Imperial Palace and the Knights' training ground." Such places made the girl a bit wary. After all, it was a bit dangerous. But it looked like the Duke was going to introduce her to the Order of Knights. For the sake of her own way of survival, she needed to charm Knight Address. He was a member of the knightly order with amazing powers, and most unusually, he blindly obeys the protagonist of the novel. If Agnes manages to get the princess, the second villain, and this knight on her side, she will be safe. She must make the second villain her ally. In the plot of the novel, this knight met the main character at a ball, and after that he will lose his head, so for now she still has a chance. This knight has a weakness for small, cute girls, but Agnes in turn was a tall and fatal beauty. Today is the official jousting day. It is the day when the ranking within the knight's order can change. Leaning a bit towards the girl, tried to explain to her the essence of everything going on. Looking around the area, the girl noticed that there was plenty of space, and also that the position of the Duke was quite high among the subordinates. Such absolute submission to the Duke from the knights even made the girl laugh a little. Lovely covering her smile with a fan, the girl snuggled closer to the guy. "It's all right. By the way, I'm sorry for following you so adamantly I realize I might interfere, but I'm very curious, the girl added. This is not the kind of place a mere man can come to out of sheer curiosity, came someone's voice coming down the stairs nearby. Send her back, Commander! This is a breach of discipline! This knight's voice sounded as imperious and commanding as possible. Agnes immediately recognized her as the same knight who had served the second princess without refusal, but she still didn't understand what such an icebreaker could like about the protagonist. I apologize, I wasn't thinking at all. I realize I'm breaking the rules, but the moment I thought he would leave without me, said Agnes, trying to squeeze out an emotion of pity. Of course, discipline is important, but since the commander has finally brought a bride, we won't treat her so harshly, and yet you can stay, Agnes pronounced, leaving the room. As the night passed by the future Archduchess, the girl realized that their first meeting she had completely screwed up, and the life-saving project was a failure. Remembering the events of the novel, Agnes recalled the very duel where during the exhibition fight Agnes took the upper hand over a male knight and then stood up all smeared with mud, can be considered one of the best in the novel. In fact, after she came up to the protagonist, ready to cry, took off her helmet and knelt down, dedicating this victory to the protagonist, reading this moment of the novel, Agnes thought how cool these words sounded. According to the rules, only knights could participate in the demonstration fights, the novel said, from the first 30 of each order. As it turned out, Adressa was ranked 31st among the entire ranking of knights, which meant that today's duel would decide whether or not she would be in the top 30. After the first crossing of the balls, Agnes got nervous because she didn't think it was that tense. It was like someone was hitting a brass plate right above her ear. Suddenly, the Duke drew the girl's attention to a servant standing next to the sword training rack. As it turned out, it was the princess's spy. Ernest purposely left him here and also suggested the girl to play out some scene in front of him. But at this point, the girl was no longer interested in the fact that there were also spies within the knightly order, but how noisy the room was. Notice that Duke decided to cover her ears with his hands already. His hands were much bigger than the girl's palms, so this gesture made her feel more comfortable. Can I cheer for someone? Agnes decided to clarify before her next action, after all. Well, there is no prohibition. Every knight fights with the support of a lady. Ernest answered her without expecting anything. And after this endorsement, Agnes, with all the strength she had in her voice, shouted words of encouragement to the whole arena. Sparkling star Address! You are a beauty! Address wins! Such shouts clearly didn't please the Knight of Address very much, while it elicited some praise from the Duke. Don't feel bad. She's just remarkably shy, Ernest told her, and the girl realized that if she embarrassed the knight even one more time, she would be the one to take her down. At this time in the arena, the tension between the opponents was heating up a little, for the knight began to make some jokes about it. You are so lucky to have such a pretty girl cheering for you. Address instantly struck her final blow, thus leading herself to a rise in the rankings. After the fight, Agnes decided to still ask Duke what it was about the wind they felt. I wouldn't call it a technique. It's better to say that this power that appears when reaching a certain level, he answered her. Suddenly, the girl noticed that Address was right in front of them. Since I was the winner, please, Commander, become my opponent, said the knight respectfully. This fight was a cause of admiration for Agnes. She couldn't take her eyes off it either. She was so focused that she didn't pay attention to everything around her. On the battlefield, Ernest had acquired the nickname of the Fierce Knight, and now that the girl saw his skills, she could feel that tension, and also noticed that he looked quite satisfied now. He's so perfect that even if he wanted to, he couldn't be hurt, and the princess is not a bad guy. Suddenly, Agnes noticed that the servant who was standing near the weapon stand had disappeared. The girl's drink was very ordinary, but it bothered her that no one was around. If she were a villain, she would not have missed this chance. So quickly grabbing a piece of paper and a pen, the girl drew a silhouette of a bird that represented a shield, and although it was drawn, it looked quite reliable. The address that suddenly appeared nearby also announced that the commander had gone to catch the one who dared to attack the future Duchess during the duel. That's how. It looks like they really hate me. I can't count how many times in my life I've already been in danger, Agnes said, playing innocent foolishness. But when the knight asked about the bird, the girl had to think of something quickly. The bird I bought for my protection. If I hadn't done that, it would have become a carcass on a spit. Honestly, I'm new in the capital, and I don't know it at all. I haven't even had time to mess with anyone, and they already hate me so much. Agnes tried to play the victim. If your life is so often violated, you must tell the Emperor someone is probably behind it, and after an investigation, he must be punished severely. The knight's voice was unwavering, and her phrases were just dry facts. Already fully into her role, Agnes even managed to let out a tear of bitterness. It's just that we hardly ever go out. I realize that we won't be able to go to cafes or exhibitions like other couples, but it's all right because I'm not hurt. But that's the most important thing, Agnes said, as if she was coming to the end of her performance. Just at that moment, the Duke returned and the girl rushed into his warm embrace. But her mind remained as cold-blooded as ever. She was still more interested in who dared to make an attempt on her life. It turned out that it was an assassin. And if you believe the original novel is how the first villain thought to carry out their nefarious plans, the girl also decided to remind the Duke about the servant who should not have left his place near the weapons rack. So the Duke would have to find out if the guy was a double agent. And Agnes also decided that she had managed to charm the knight address, even though she still looked at her without adoration. Back at the manor, the girl read the new news, or rather rumors that shocked her. It said that a knight from the order was charmed by a wonderful lady, and from one look at her, his heart beat more often, making him a hostage of love. The butler tried to calm the young lady. So that's what the article came out, but it's all right. Anyone will consider it nonsense. There are rumors going around. You should not take it too seriously. Then another butler brought to the lady the letter that had come to her address. It was a slight surprise, for the girl had not expected anything of the kind. After checking the letter for any threats, the girl decided to read it. And as it turned out, it was an invitation to a tea ceremony from Princess Dioles. Agnes was determined about the ceremony. Shouldn't I see in person the main villain who had caused the Duke so much trouble? This determination of the girl surprised the butler. "And you are very reliable," said the latter. Sending one of the butlers to the dress shop to get the dresses already made, Agnes was rejoicing inside, for she would finally be able to see this terrifying princess in person. But before that, she had to prepare a servant to protect her. As soon as the girls working in the shop entered the palace, Agnes could not fend off their attention and admiration. But before that, she announced to them a small list of rules. First, no stealing the Duke's underwear. Second, no picking up the Duke's hair to sell. And third, no blabbing about what was going on here. And the last one is not to fall in love with the Duke, cling to him, or hang around him. Can you fulfill that? Agnes said with a smile on her face. Suddenly, a young lady's voice cut through the crowd. "Madam, you are so in love with the Archduke!" This phrase made the crowd of young ladies squeal with delight, while Agnes herself was a little embarrassed. Suddenly, a few cats jumped into the lap of the young ladies. As it turned out, Agnes had bought them under contract from a magician. If you break even one clause of the contract, they will turn into monsters and bite everyone around them. If something particularly appeals to you, speak up. While you're working here, you can ask for anything. The butler will bring it all. Such benevolence of the mistress surprised the girls very much. At that moment, the very fellow who had frightened the young letter carrier in town entered the castle grounds. While the girls were admiring the beauty of the young mistress, who suited any dress they offered, the Duke returned to the manor. He was surprised to hear that she was receiving guests, to which the butler told him, "Madam has invited the mistress of the dress shop and her assistants." Her Highness the Princess invited Madam to a tea party. The butler continued to narrate everything that was going on. And he also didn't forget to mention that he had seen someone suspicious on the estate grounds today. It was a swarthy-skinned man in a dark cloak. The Duke dared to assume that it was a military man from the desert, to which the butler told him, "We are not sure, but there seems to have been some kind of tattoo on his face." "But what would a man from the desert be doing in the Empire?" the Duke asked him. "That I don't know. Maybe introduce someone to him?" "He looks unusual, so it would be quick to get on his tail," the butler suggested. After this conversation, Ernest remembered that it was in the desert that he had a battle that ended in a draw for the first and last time in his life. It was as if everything around him had been erased, leaving only a feeling that gave him goosebumps. His opponent's gaze was like his gaze. Someone who was ready to die of boredom right now. That guy was the first one who was able to kill the Duke. At the time, Ernest piously hoped it wasn't him, not the same guy from the desert. Some time after the assistants left the manor, and the shopkeeper Agnes immediately hurried to show herself to Ernest. As soon as the boy appeared in front of her, the girl made a scene as if the boy was too handsome, and the light of his beauty blinded her. As it turned out, the guy was going to the same party with the princess. "Just a simple escort. If I walk you, we'll look like lovebirds in love." With a nonchalant face, Ernest explained. The girl did not understand the Duke's intentions after all. Coming there, he dressed himself up as a direct danger. There was a real battlefield going on. The girl also noticed that the Duke had not been seen in the manor lately. Been busy, had some things to look into. In a way, it has something to do with you too. When you were wandering through the desert, didn't anyone help you? The boy decided to ask Agnes directly, but the girl didn't really know, because the first appearance of the fourth villain in the novel only happened at a slave auction. In fact, all these cute nicknames were a bit embarrassing for the guy, so he asked her to use only one at a time. As soon as the couple crossed the threshold of the estate, the young Duke was sprinkled with excessive attention from the surrounding people. These ladies were clearly openly ignoring the presence of the future Archduchess, which was standing next to the guy. But the girl was not going to stand aside, so she discreetly planted a caterpillar on the dress of one of the ladies, and then immediately began to play her role. "There are caterpillars in the princess's castle? Does that mean that this place is not cleaned properly?" Such mockery did not leave the indifferent ladies silent. "The caterpillar appeared after you came. Doesn't that mean it was you who rolled out of the mud?" "That's right. I don't know where you came from, but you are quite rude now. Mocking the princess's castle is nothing short of an insult to the princess herself," said the second court lady. "But it was the rolling out, wasn't it, dear? After all, we had quite a hot morning today." Such a phrase took even the Duke himself by surprise. He had not expected such a revelation. "It was you who never let me go, Ernest." Agnes smiled wryly. The girl continued to play the role of the playful bride to the chagrin of the court ladies. When she got closer to the palace, she noticed the butler standing at the entrance. "Hey you, where's the tea party? Which way is it?" To which the butler confusedly replied to her, "Ah, I apologize, lady. I was staring at you too intently and impudently." While the girl was rejoicing at the evil stares that were directed at her, she noticed that the Duke beside her was somehow depressed, as if upset about something. While coming closer to the entrance, the girl barely managed to get the Duke out of her thoughts. He did hear her after all. "Thank you for walking me to this place. But now it's time for you to leave, because this is where women's territory begins." Walking forward a bit more, the girl's gaze collided with the very one she'd been waiting to meet for a long time. It was villain number 2, Diolestiran. "Pleased to meet you, Your Highness Princess." She approached her closely, making a bow in respect. If you remembered the biography of the princess from the novel, it said that she was called a doll collector. She played with men's feelings and threw parties for ladies to play with them like dolls. "Maybe you want to be a doll. I'm so generous. I give my dolls plenty of opportunities." Such a suggestion from the princess made Agnes a little embarrassed, but she answered without showing it. We have to refuse, because I am too beautiful to be called that. This answer amused the princess. That's a good joke. I don't know if you know that you are the first lady to refuse my offer so easily. Oh, well, I think you'll fit right in next to me. Come here, said Princess Agnes, pointing to the seat next to her. When Agnes sat down at the table and introduced herself under her new name, which was specified in the contract, the princess noticed that the family name was not among the Imperial noble families. Our family is so small and weak that you, the future owner of the throne, have no reason to remember it. Agnes answered her. How do you know? I look at you, and it seems to me that your mother was a splendid woman. I would never forget a lady worthy of your mother's place, said the princess to her, and the conversation degenerated into a sweet talk between the two friends. But in fact, the princess was well aware that Oberon was not Agnes's real name. I love puzzles, and because I was born a genius, there was not a single problem that I couldn't solve, so my life was starting to lose its meaning. So the girl became like a new mystery to the princess. Don't let yourself be solved too easily. I would like to enjoy you as long as possible, so I hope for you, Lady Oberon. Well, Agnes, in a slight change of topic, touched on the subject of her lover. By the way, my future fiancé is so popular, and I'm a possessive girl. Even though the wedding hasn't taken place yet, I believe everything will work out well. So, I have a question. Can you tell me which ladies are showing a special interest in my husband? I think you are well aware of such things, said Agnes, looking straight into the princess's eyes. This statement made all the ladies present very angry. How ungenerous it is to call someone you haven't even married yet your husband. But this reaction satisfied Agnes's ego. Really? I didn't even notice. We often call each other that in private. I guess it came out in public, too. She smiled wryly, which made the ladies around her even angrier. Well, it seems you're really possessive, and I'm a real grabber. Agnes felt her gaze on her. She was looking at her as if she was about to be torn to pieces. And yet, you shouldn't make a scarecrow of me. If such a beauty were to be taken from life, mankind would lose a great deal. The girl tried to change the subject. The only scarecrow I would like is your character, so it's a pity since it has no form, the princess told her. Well, then, try to do something nice. I'm generous. Even if you do something stupid, I'll forgive you. Apparently, this conversation was going in the right direction, because the tension between Agnes and the princess was subsiding, and as if everything was going right. Well, I think that should be enough. Life-saving project, point 2. Hook the princess! Curiosity! She took the bait! Thought Agnes smugly, watching the course of their dialogue. On the carriage ride home, Agnes bragged to the Duke that she had managed to get the princess's attention and that she was an interesting person. My goal is to make the princess lose interest in you if I can get her to become attached to me, and you'll be much more comfortable, the girl said, revealing her plan a bit. Yes, and it will be quite useful for me to make friends with the princess. And I also need something for that dot, which newspaper in the Empire has the most potential? Agnes asked the Duke. It shouldn't be too big. Better just a medium-sized newspaper that young people read. Ideally, if its director has potential. Ernesta wondered a bit why the girl wanted a newspaper. Even though the media is in the clutches of the princess, there are certainly those who don't want to submit to authority, so we'll take this publisher away from the princess. But it's not that simple. So what will you offer them in return? Ernest asked. Monopoly rights to officially publish our love story. Other reporters will only have to speculate, and we'll arrange a special date in front of this publisher. Then he'll print our column, and people will buy their paper. If everything works out, the number of readers will increase, and the influence on the masses will increase. The girl began to explain her plan to him. In that case, we will sell the truth, and those who only have access to rumors will fall by the wayside, although it will take some time, continued Agnes. After the story, Ernest concluded that the girl must be from a noble family. You are well aware of the relations between people and even know how to use it. Someone from a family of peasants would not easily think of such a thing. He says it so indifferently that it's scary, but I don't know anything about Misty's story from the novel. The most important thing in the book is not told. Such praise drove the girl into despair, though she tried not to show it on the outside. It doesn't matter whether I'm from the nobility or the common people. It doesn't stop the hunters from following me. Agnes tried, as if to change the subject, leaning on the arm of the sofa. But she also wondered, will I be able to continue to cover up my memory loss? What if someone who knew Misty in the past shows up? As they reached the carriage, the girl fell asleep, and the Duke decided to carry her himself. But you can't do that. The burning eyes and the movement of the full energy of the morning itself, and also the movement of the hair at a simple turn of the head. It's only been a month, but in that short time she has excited me so much. However, even someone like her, spending time with me will eventually collapse. I'm afraid the woman that will suffer a lot of suffering being with me will eventually have to give up on herself. Such thoughts did not leave the Duke as he carried the girl to the manor. I have chosen the role of one who does not want to marry, and yet I don't want to let anyone else endure it. The lad was evidently beginning to have feelings toward Agnes. When the guy was about to leave, the girl grabbed him, speaking through her sleep. She asked him not to leave her, and the next moment pulled him even closer to her, which made the guy a little embarrassed and blushing. Oh, somehow it seems rather complicated. Now, all of the Duke's thoughts were filled with nothing but this red-headed maiden. Toward evening, as the Duke sat in his office, a butler came to him. I want to report on the investigation you ordered earlier. First appeared in the capital, he often goes to cheap bars and inns and shows unusual interest in newspapers. If he reads the local papers, then he must be able to speak our language, and at the very least, he must be of the Rom people. No. Perhaps also Kun, suggested the Duke. The peoples who roam the desert are actually divided into several dozen groups, and of course there are strong ones with large numbers of people living near the oases. The Ram and Kun peoples are just such. They have black hair, scarlet eyes, and a tattoo on one side of their face. And if their hair is black, there's a good chance they're Kun people. We've found out that on other days, besides when he was spotted by the butler, he's been loitering around the estate for quite some time. The butler continued his story. The landlady at the inn where he spent a good deal of time said a word or two about him looking for someone, so he read the morning papers every day. And yet, when I asked her about the desert, she mumbled something and pretended not to understand, and assuming there is some connection between the two. The Duke thought as if he was putting 2 + 2 together. Everything inside felt like it was turning upside down for no particular reason, so the Duke was determined that he should meet this stranger in person, then not now, not while it was worth putting him under surveillance. The next morning, when Agnes woke up, she decided that today she would call the maid she had been diligently drawing all this time, but before that, he would go to the bathroom and change his clothes. As soon as the girl got ready, she rushed to the Duke to show him the painting, and by this time, 2 butlers had just arrived. They were a little surprised that the lady was awake so early, but the girl immediately interrupted them. Now, I'll show you something amazing. Close the doors and come closer, and don't forget to curtain the windows. After all these instructions were done, the windows curtained and the doors closed. The girl put the painting on the floor, pointing her hand at it, and cast a magic spell that came to her mind. And at the same second, out of the painting, on which was drawn a lovely maid, came a girl that immediately rushed into the arms of the young mistress. "How do you do, mistress? Give me a name. I was born only for your sake, and I want a name from you by all means." After these words, Agnes called her Juliet. "Thank you for naming me so well, mistress," replied the little maid to her. The Duke and the 2 butlers behind him were indeed surprised. "Succeeded the old man before he died ripe with unprecedented events," said one of them. While everyone present was recovering from the shock, Agnes was already giving instructions to the young maid. "From now on, take care of Ernest as you would me, and try to get along with the butlers." Ernest watched this very carefully and noticed one interesting thing. Will never betray anything, looks only at its creator, and obeys orders without question. So he decided to remind the girl to be careful. "You are in possession of something too rare and valuable." After all, what the girl had just done was a creation. That is, divine territory. After all, there are many people in this world who have the same ability of drawing magician, but they have no talent for drawing, so they do not pose such a threat. But Agnes's drawings are so good that one can build a personal exhibition at least now. And if someone finds out about it, the girl can become their target. And of course, the guy had no doubts about the girl's amazing strength. "Of course you'll do a great job yourself." The girl also decided to remind the Duke about the publishing house they had chosen after all, when they returned from the tea ceremony. The guy told her that he had already thought of everything in that plan, and she should just wait a bit. "Also, I have something to tell you. We arrested those slave traders. You have to testify in court in a couple days," said Ernest to her. "Also, after that, I suggest we go for a walk. There's a great alley near the courthouse. You can have a good time there." Initially, such a suggestion from the guy shocked Agnes a little. She stood with a slight blush on her cheeks. But later, she agreed with all her emotions and gave the guy a bright smile. Agnes was curious about the court in this world, although she was always wary of such places, because she knew that it was better not to go near the courthouse for her own safety. "Case number 8920, we are here to testify," Ernest announced as he approached the entrance of the building, and after the butlers immediately told him to follow. "Misty, I need to go get ready and you stay here. When it's time to go out, the clerk will explain everything to you. You cannot worry inside the courthouse, magic is blocked." After these words, the girl realized why in the morning the guy told her to leave at home pen and paper. After Ernest left the room, the butler immediately offered the girl to take her to the waiting room. Sitting down on the couch, the girl immediately noticed the newspaper and began to read the news. After a while, the butler returned and brought the girl a mask with the words, "Madam Witness, put this on and go through that door over there." Going inside, the girl noticed that in the center of the hall on their knees were people, so-called slave traders. But when the girl raised her eyes to the judge, she was as if struck by an electric shock, because there sat Archduke Ernest. The trial began, and it was Agnes's turn to testify. The prosecutor, who was in charge of the trial, said, "3 concordant testimonies have been received. I ask for the death penalty for the criminals numbered 982 and 989. After a while, the gavel sounded, and the court was ready to make a decision. According to the 8th article of the Special Code of the Slave Trade, as well as the testimony of witnesses, the defendants numbered 982 and 989 are sentenced to death." After the court's decision, the girl was waiting for the Duke in the waiting room. She still couldn't come back from the shock she received a couple minutes ago. "Wow, crazy. Both sexy and brainy at the same time. How can the judge's black robe fit him so well? Holy shit, everything's going crazy!" The girl couldn't calm her heartbeat. She blushed all red and smiled stupidly. Just at this moment, the Duke came up behind her. "It must have been awkward for you, but thanks for waiting. Let's go for a walk to get rid of the boredom." During the walk, the girl decided to still ask Ernest how long he had been a judge, since he hadn't told her anything about it. How was she supposed to know? "Sorry. The people around me know every little thing about me. Here I figured you would too," the Hay guy said. "So you're an archduke, the head of a knightly order, and a judge besides." The girl decided to clarify. "To be more precise, Supreme Judge, by law, the position of Supreme Judge can only be held by someone from the Shubaiden family." Ernest started his story. "The blood of the sun god runs in the Shubaiden family, so our court is fair. We cannot be deceived. If I had a brother, we could share the power, but unfortunately, I am an only child." And yet I should have executed them earlier. I'm sorry I only did it now. Still apologized the guy, holding the girl's hand while walking down the alley. Walking along this alley, the girl was all glowing with happiness because the weather was beautiful and the day was successful. Happiness means, I never thought of such a thing. Suddenly began to ponder the Duke. It surprised the girl a little bit whether the guy had never thought about happiness and was not happy. The guy again wondered if he was happy, to which the girl answered him, You have to say that you are happy. Only then happiness will come. If it is difficult for you to say it alone, I will help you. I will do it for you, and you will be happy. Henceforth, be happy. You will be happy, Ernest, and all because I will make you so, said the girl, holding out her hand to the boy. And though the boy did not say he was happy until the end, Agnes thought he was in a good mood. At that time, in the editorial office of the magazine that Agnes had chosen, it was as if something had happened. The head of the newspaper was somehow nervous after reading the letter. Everyone in the office noticed that he had been strange since the morning. What was it about the letter that had made him so nervous? Please do not leave. You are going nowhere today, and follow me. A sensation. No, it's a huge sensation, shouted the guy to the whole office, putting on his raincoat and leaving the building. Arriving at the place that was indicated in the letter, the editor and his team found themselves at the very personal press date that Agnes had intended to arrange. As expected, the head of the editorial office instantly came running after receiving the offer from the girl. After all, she had offered to publish all official news and even interviews only in their paper, so this is a great chance for them to get away from the princess and her support. But it seems that they are greatly surprised, for they have not tasted even a bite of this wonderful menu that stood before them. I think I should go out for a while when they ask you for an interview. Make up something, will you? Agnes whispered to the boy, intending to leave the room to relax a bit. Calling Juliet to her, the girl hurriedly left the room, looking forward to tomorrow's article. Everything is so smooth, but can life be so perfect? Thought the girl, looking at her reflection in the mirror. And my face is so beautiful. How can a plan be so perfect yet? Agnes continued to say, but looking at Juliet, who was also glowing with happiness. But suddenly there was a noise outside the window, which the girl initially thought was another attack. And like a faithful servant, Juliet said, Mistress, it's dangerous. I'll look first. And then the determined young lady went towards the window and opened it sharply. And afterwards, when Agnes had a glimpse of the strange fellow in the dark cloak, she thought, Love will say that he is very suspicious. I think it is better not to get in touch with him, and we must close the window quickly. But after the stranger called her name, it was as if everything turned over inside the girl. But suddenly the girl heard her name being called Duke. Dear, it took me too long to powder my nose, but I didn't want to keep you waiting at all. The girl returned then to the main hall, hiding her misgivings behind a nervous smile. But suddenly the girl heard the Duke calling her name. The Duke immediately noticed that something was wrong with the girl, for her skin turned pale, as if she had seen a ghost. To which the girl only leaned closer to the lad and whispered, We'll talk in the carriage. First, we need to get out of here as soon as possible. After these words, the guy immediately got up from the table and resolutely headed away towards the exit. Well, although the couple went outside, but the girl did not know what to say to the Duke, so the girl started her story from the beginning. While I was in the restroom, some man knocked on the window from outside. Suddenly he called out a name that wasn't my real name. Misty, you said before that your memory hasn't fully returned yet, but you're not trying to get it back properly. You don't seem to want to. What's the reason? Ernest decided to ask this question after all. It's just that I'm living well enough now. Then is there any need to bring back memories? Thought the protagonist of this story. And after this phrase, another attempt was made on the girl. They were hired assassins. Identify yourself. And why did you do it? Based on the answer, I can arrest you using the right of the head of the Night Order. Ernest confidently continued to speak, looking towards the cloaked stranger. Misty, why is your face like that? I thought you said you didn't like carriages because they resemble cages, so I ruined it. I know you were forced into it." Then the strange man began to speak. "And besides, I thought you would have fun here because you were too bored before. Well, you've always gotten to the fun part. Also, it's been so long since I've seen you. Aren't you happy to see me at all? Let's go back to our paradise together," said the stranger in the cloak, kindly extending his hand to the girl. All this idle chatter was already beginning to make Ernest angry. "And what nonsense are you talking about?" The man resented it unhappily. "I think you're just confusing me with someone else. My name is Titania," the girl spoke then, peeking cautiously out from under the guy's back. "I am Titania, the bastard daughter of the Viscount. I have absolutely no idea who Misty is." The girl continued to speak confidently, but the guy in front of her completely disbelieved her words. "Why do you keep pretending that we don't know each other? And if you don't know me, then who in the world does? Have you really lost your memory? If this is a joke, it's not funny at all," he said, while at the same time, a note of disappointment could be heard in the guy's voice. Apparently, on a subconscious level, the guy realized that the girl didn't remember him. "Here's my face that you loved so much. Still don't remember?" Surprised, he questioned. Agnes could not remember him, although she found his face quite attractive. Ernest was already very familiar with him. "And you are the only one who closed himself off from my sword." Remembering all the details of that battle, the Duke spoke. Such facts surprised the girl very much. She knew, of course, that in the novel Ernest had received a terrible wound in the war, but to have it inflicted by such a man, she was not prepared for that. "I didn't even see you during the war that all the desert peoples arrived for, so why did you suddenly show up here?" Still also hostile, Ernest spoke towards the cloaked guy. If one were to delve into history, one would remember that between the Empire and other countries lies the desert. It is a hot, sandy sea that has no end, and there is an oasis around it. Different peoples live there, among them Kun and Ram. They are basic, and the word Lakun means war in their language. And Brian is the strongest of these Kun warriors. Look, this is all Brian. He didn't appreciate the flattery that was flying in his direction, and the people have no idea what you're making such a fuss about, so you don't remember me. Ernest then spoke with a little aggression towards Brian. "Well, who knows? I see you now. Some man next to Misty. Also heard jokes about her being your fiancé," replied Brian to him. "Together. If you want to stay here, so do so, but please don't keep me waiting too long." That bright smile, full of crush towards the girl, made her confused and embarrassed for a moment. "I'll always be there for you. Don't forget me, for I can't live without you. See you later, my Misty." With these words, the boy left the manor. What kind of relationship has bound him to the Villainous, since he is so tender? Then thought Misty, digesting everything that was happening. This atmosphere between these two had become so awkward. We crossed the desert together, or fell in love with each other. Their relationship between Ernest is also taken from the novel. And while the girl was going over all these storylines in her head, she noticed one small detail, for the carriage had been destroyed and she had something to go back on. But when the girl looked at the boy to ask him about this small detail, she noticed that he was very angry, but at the same time as if frightened by the encounter. It was not clear what it was that made him so afraid. The girl managed to knock him out of his thoughts, reminding him that they should go home. And with a little exhale, the guy decided, "Sorry, that's what we'll do. I'll get a balloon." The guy also decided to tell the girl that he was sometimes illegally haunted by flying everything, so he still hadn't called it. In case the carriage was destroyed, there was no other choice. As soon as the future spouses returned home, Ernest immediately called the Gaza, to tell them, the only one, about the attack that had happened. Agnes in turn decided to ask how many newspapers had been sold yesterday, to which the editor replied that they had sold all of them. "For the first time in history, we have achieved a full sale," he said. And at that moment his eyes shone with happiness, and tears of joy flowed involuntarily down his face. So the girl decided to give the affected workers some kind of sweets, and this was her gift for a job well done. I hope that your newspaper's business will only go uphill. After all, your editorial board is now supported not by the princess, but by me. At that moment, with that phrase, the girl decided to slowly move closer to the essence of her plan. Oh, by the way, I wanted to ask you something. Do you have any fertile land in mind? Thought to ask the girl, looking at the editor. Lands. But isn't that something that nobles are usually more knowledgeable about? Usually the fertile lands are in the southern territories, but they already have a farm because taking care of the lands allocated by His Majesty, the emperors, is the task of the noble lords, said the editor. The girl then decided to clarify about the useless lands with the editor. He wasn't knowledgeable. Probably one can find out about them by looking at the palace land books. But after going over his meager knowledge about lands a bit, he said that the border with the wilderness is exactly the same kind of lands. That's why the unrest there doesn't stop. About 10 years ago, one nation was gone, and now those lands belonged to the Imperial palace. After this dialogue, the editor's head was filled with a bunch of questions to which he never received a clear answer from the young mistress. The only thing the girl said was, "You can look forward to it, after all. It is you who can be the first to publicize this news." Smiling sweetly, the girl looked at the editor, who was already glowing with happiness. On that, all sponsorship payments will officially come to you immediately after receiving approval from the Imperial Finance Ministry. Then, after this sentence, the editor hurriedly left the manor and started work as soon as possible. Even the girl decided to turn the gazes that were directed at Ernest to her own side. But she did not leave the thought of what will happen after the appearance of the protagonist of the novel. And to achieve success, she will have to go through a lot of tests. Yes, and she considered it somehow shameful to disappear after receiving a pile of money. Therefore, she decided that she would create an amusement park that would help to dispel Ernest's interest and also earn a lot of money. Therefore, the girl immediately decided to get down to business regarding the lands. She decided to ask the princess, for it might be time to call her. It's pretty big then, so it needs a spacious place. At that moment, the girl thought as she strolled down the alley. Suddenly her gaze fell on the bare torso of Ernest, who was practicing nearby. Trying to recover from what she saw, the girl casually called out to the guy. "I finally completed the cat that will protect me and was looking for a place where I could call her," the protagonist confessed. "If you summon her in the garden, I think all the flowers will die. I'm sorry I distracted you from your training." Afterward, the girl still decided to change the subject a bit by asking the guy if it was okay to walk around so undressed. To which the guy calmly answered her, "It's all right. It seems to be the result of you living with me, because it's much better to train at home when you don't have any prying eyes." But the girl was still trying to recover from what she had seen, and the guy as if did not notice how the girl blushed in front of him. Well, afterward, the guy said that he would order the butler to bring the painting and went to change clothes, asking the girl to wait for him a little. The girl's heart really almost went crazy. She did not understand how it was possible to think of this beautiful man in such an inappropriate way. Her face was all burning and her cheeks were covered with blush. Having shown everyone the picture of the cat, which in a couple of minutes had to go out, the girl heard a dose of praise from everyone present. She immediately began to revitalize the painting. But all of a sudden, when the girl pointed her hand towards the painting, she was hit with something in return. It was like a force that was previously unknown to the girl. It turns out, the more detailed the painting, the more power it takes to summon it. And after that, the girl noticed that the eyes of the cat she drew were a fiercely bright light compared to all the details. Still, the first attempt was a failure. "Misty, if it's hard for you, don't do it. You're going so pale. Better stop immediately." Little by little, Ernest was already starting to worry about the girl who could barely stand on her feet. But that girl was quite confident and started to give it another try. "It's okay. It's just that she really needs me. Come on out," the girl said then, pointing her hand in the direction of the painting. Even though it was indeed dangerous and very hard for the girl, she finally summoned the one big cat that would protect her from danger. As soon as the cat approached the young mistress, she immediately bowed as a sign of respect. Even though it was really hard for Agnes, she doesn't want to ask her to go back into the picture, although the cat looked cute, but her temper was actually nasty and very insolent. She immediately demanded something to eat. "You need roast meat or eat raw lamb. Beef, pork, duck. What will you choose?" The Duke immediately began to ask. "Beef and preferably marble beef." Then the black cat answered him. Agnes stood back and marveled at how right the young man had acted in this situation, for as a commander of a knightly order should, he had quickly assessed the situation. "Oh, by the way, Ernest, I would like to show my cat to the princess and show off, but I can't just not show up. What should I do?" Resolved to interrupt the sort of silence that stood in Agnes's room, she turned to the lad. "Let's go together to the morning meeting and then just wait for her in the waiting room for a while," suggested the lad, as if predicting the girl's question in advance. "This whole thing won't last longer than an hour. Lucky if it lasts an hour at all." Next, the guy continued to narrate. "How can we both bet it won't even last half an hour?" Dying with laughter, asked Agnes. "It's all because we both don't want to lose," Ernest said smugly, but afterward he suddenly leaned closer to the girl, touching her forehead. "However, you look tired. Why don't you go get some rest?" suggested the caring guy. And after the girl's attempt to get up to go to her chambers, she suddenly fainted. "Her body is cold, so we warmed the bed. But is it true that medicines don't work on such symptoms?" Ernest then asked the butler who had entered the chambers. "Yes, you just have to hope that the body temperature will rise to normal on its own. If she was conscious, we could offer hot tea, but that's difficult right now. Besides, there is only medicine for fever, which all as one only lower the body temperature." Still, the butler also continued to explain the girl's visible symptoms. "Still, we can't just leave her like this, so cover your face and try to find some medicine," ordered Ernest to the butler as he left the room. The girl's body was so cold. Is it all because she breathed life into it? Or is it just because of the large size? Or does it have something to do with the activity of the painting? As the guy decided to write all this down, he felt someone coming up behind him. It was a girl. And did she really come to her senses that quickly? The girl began to come closer and closer to the guy, and her eyes were full of passion and desire for the guy. The girl explained her kiss by the fact that the heat was coming out of her through her lips. Immediately after that, she lost consciousness again, but it seems that after that, her body temperature returned to normal. The guy had no idea that there could be such a connection between a mage and a descendant of the sun god, so this situation made him curious and find out a lot more about it. The next morning, the girl came to her senses. "What did I hear? So it was Juliet's screams! Jesus, mistress, you've got black circles under your eyes. I'm sorry, I didn't see you through. I should have taken care of even your sleep," apologized Madame. Juliet also informed the girl about the latest events, that nowadays Ernest was drinking coffee with the butler, and the cat was lying in the backyard. She went downstairs to have breakfast, where her boyfriend was waiting for her. He informed her that today's breakfast was pancakes with blueberry jam and cream cheese. The girl was surprised when the guy found out that it was her favorite dish, to which he simply gave her a calm tone in reply. "Been watching you. You only eat them. That's your toast," he said. At that moment, the cat sitting next to him, who was tasting the same toast, started spitting in disgust. "What's that? It's just ruined my appetite." She was indignant. In fact, that day the girl had a premonition that the day would be noisy from the very morning, and then they arrived at the Imperial palace to show the cat to the princess. Then in the waiting room, Agnes decided to read a book called The Prince and the Beggar. And the cat was a little interested in the story, so the girl began to read it in her voice. And there lived a prince and a beggar. She read, "The book tells what happened when they jokingly switched places. Suddenly there was screaming outside the door. This startled the girl a little, but the cat was already on guard, protecting her mistress. Someone who yells threats isn't usually scary. Wait a bit. I'll see for myself." Then said the girl, restraining the beast, "It's enough just to stay home and prepare for the wedding. And His Majesty. Why let the princess flaunt herself like that? How could a girl know about politics?" These were the exact phrases the girl heard as soon as she kicked out from behind the door. Do they have multiple lives? Or is this a new way of committing suicide? Thought the girl, seeing the man who was saying such loud phrases. Suddenly the man noticed in his side vision that someone was watching him, and when he turned his head a little, he saw the girl in the doorway. What on earth is happening to this world? And even the central palace has all sorts of girls wandering around, the old man pronounced, looking at the young lady. Apparently, to the princess above them in status, they can't say a word thickly. Then thought the girl, smugly looking at these two, "Oh, and shame on you for yelling so loudly!" This phrase infuriated the elderly count, but the girl was not at all interested in who he was and what his status was, which made him even angrier. "Just an earl, and yet you make so much noise. It seems like your family is not even taught basic manners." It came out of the lady's mouth, but the girl didn't want to tolerate such a noise in the palace anymore, so she immediately called her cat, and it immediately knocked the elderly count to the floor. But the girl stopped the cat, saying, "You shouldn't be rude to everyone. You should be more careful with your expressions. Otherwise, you never know when you'll die, do you?" The heroine remarked. And by this time, someone's footsteps were heard down the hallway. "Who's that in the corridor of the central palace squeaking like a pig? What's going on here?" It turned out to be Princess Titania. The princess immediately noticed Agnes saying hello to her. "Well, I haven't seen you. Have you developed a hobby of teaching lessons to the likes of the mistresses?" To which Agnes decided to awkwardly guffaw. "Just so I could stand in the hallway and he wouldn't mutter nasty things, so I took care of him," claimed the girl. The princess also noticed a cat standing nearby and decided to ask the question that was bothering her. "Yes, I actually came today to introduce you to him. I thought you would definitely like him," said Agnes, introducing the cat to the princess. "Well, for starters, let the count go, and if he dies, you'll have to spend a lot of taxes to compensate. After all, it's a shame to let taxes go down on someone like him," he warned. "Well, that concludes today's meeting," said the princess, looking at her butler. "What? But, Your Highness, Princess, I haven't told you about the plan to change the budget for the army expenses yet." Confusedly, the man standing behind her began to justify himself. "You're still going to oppose me, aren't you? I'll think about it until tomorrow, but in the meantime, take him away and disappear yourself." After this order, there was nothing left for the man to do but obey the princess's order. Then the princess suggested to Agnes to go to the palace through the gardens. Of course, Agnes couldn't refuse the princess, because when else would she get a chance to walk with such a beauty? "Then pass, and for this huge friend please bring meat, so feed him," asked the lady. Walking through the garden, the princess couldn't help but mention how the girl had completely won over the newspaper editorial staff to her side. "Honestly, I'm amazed. I didn't think you'd decide to take a swing at newspapers, and through Ernesto besides," the girl remarked. "Glad I could surprise you, Princess, but that's not all, so save your praise," said Agnes, which made the princess even more interested in the girl. "By the way, since it's spring in the garden now, many flowers have bloomed. This rose is perfect for you." Saying that, the princess put the girl's red rose behind her ear. "Is this your princess doll game?" Agnes playfully asked her. "No, just giving it to you because it looks very nice. I think we can give these little roses the name Titania," replied the girl. When it started to get evening outside, the girl noticed that the princess had led her to the wrong place because they were getting farther away from the castle.